Hello and welcome to Talking Points on France 24. Foreign policy doesn't seem to be a factor in the US midterm elections this year. The emphasis is on jobs and the size of the government. But if the Republicans confirm expectations and make big gains in tomorrow's vote, they will likely have some impact on America's positioning on global issues such as climate change, China's currency, the Middle East, and nuclear disarmament deals with Russia. Well, to discuss the midterms and the US foreign policy agenda, I'm joined for this Talking Points by Ellen Wassilina from Republicans Abroad France. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Also here, Brian Lang from Young Democrats Abroad France. Hello, Brian.
Good morning.
I'd like to ask first, Ellen, I'm not sure if there's a very clear Republican foreign policy agenda this time around, given that there's so much emphasis on the domestic problems. How do you see it?
Oh, I think there is a strong foreign policy that we have, or that we would like to have, on issues that are, of course, of interest for both Democrats and Republicans, meaning national security, meaning terrorism. Of course, as you know, since 9/11, this has been a big crux to our foreign policy agenda, which we do both agree on in securing the homeland with the new Ministry of the Homeland Defense. I think we have to remember that the radical Islam is indeed a danger to our homeland, and I think that in having a strong military and in projecting peace and democracy throughout the world can, of course, and I'm sure we do agree on stability, bringing stability to the world.
Brian, do you see a coherent Republican foreign policy agenda?
Coherent? I do see a policy agenda, but some of the ideas sometimes I don't think are well thought out. And so it's going to be interesting what they actually do. But I mean, usually, if you remember, the Senate and Congress don't have that much effect on foreign policy, so they can only do things at the margins. And they can make some things more interesting, perhaps with China, but they're really not going to be probably concentrating on foreign policy.
What do you think?
Well, I think that you have to remember that, should the Republicans take over the House of Representatives, there are, of course, these powerful committees, which are the International Affairs Committee, the Armed Service Committee, and the Intelligence Committee, which then can make important decisions for policy formulation by the United States, and not forget the interest groups and, of course, the role of the media in these decisions and the projection of the decisions that are made. And, of course, we can always go back to say, well, yes, we are a democracy, so are shared powers. So I think the president, who is at the epicenter of this, at the top, shall we say, of the executive branch, can we go back and say that he has not managed maybe this part so well? And what does he know about war and foreign policy?
Well, I mean, I just want to give you an example of the nuisance. Like, they want to close Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, and they found a prison in Illinois that was built and unused. Perfect. Put the inmates, transfer them there. It's a high security, maximum security prison, but then Obama couldn't get funding for it. So these things were actually changing the foreign policy, but it was just kind of at the margins in that sense.
So do you think, really, would you like those terrorists on American soil?
Well, I mean, it's a maximum high security prison, and the fact is, you're right. No one wants them in their backyard. They have to go somewhere.
I know, I wouldn't want them in my
But the way we're treating them in Cuba is far worse. And I mean, it is a maximum security prison, so the odds are them breaking out is probably slim to none. So it's not like they're going to be. It's not like it's a club fed where they're going to be walking around town.
Well, there must be a great resistance to it too, don't you think? I mean, if President Obama, could not even have support in his own party after so long, and I think the executive agreement was signed the third day after he was in office. Why has he not been able to move that forward? Where is the resistance coming from?
Well, you're right. It's definitely coming from both parties a little bit, but now that they think the Republicans probably get control of the House, maybe increase some seats in the Senate. Okay, they will increase some seats in the Senate, unfortunately, but they're not going to control the Senate.
That's democracy, isn't it? It's
it is democracy.
The people have spoken.
These issues will get more and more
difficult.
difficult.
They will have spoken tomorrow night.
Tomorrow,
yes. Absolutely.
But it seems you're both sort of heading towards this idea that Obama's sort of moved slightly closer to the center on some of the foreign policy or national security issues. Would you say that's the case?
I would say most politicians, and Bill Clinton was a perfect example of that. Once you get elected, you realize I had to go to the left or right wings to get elected, and then you have to go in the middle to actually govern. So therefore, Obama has moved to the center, because even when he had a majority in the Senate and the House, You said you can't do everything you want to do. You do need cooperation from the other party.
So do you think, I mean, again, we're saying, if the Republicans get at least one of the houses tomorrow night, do you think that we'd see a change in tone at least? I mean, because obviously there is this important element of Obama, trying to essentially engage with a lot of countries which were not particularly friendly to the US before, and of course the Republicans have a completely different style.
Sure.
Do you think there might be a very different tone afterwards? From him, at least.
I think extending his hand as he did in the Middle East was not wrong, but I don't think that America should excuse itself for its greatness and its past history and the power that it brings to protect. Ask the Eastern Europeans if they want America to be less strong. There's that aspect too of protecting. There's always been that Russia is behind, or other menaces, or now terrorism, which is a much more intangible menace. I think you'll ask a lot of countries if they would like to have the American presence in their country. And I'm not talking about occupation, obviously, but I'm talking about military support, NATO, ISAF. This network of armed ability or capability that has brought in NATO too, and brought Eastern European and Central European countries into NATO, too, has brought in stability. Where there is stability, there is economic growth.
Warren, I think Ellen's touching on, things which I wanted to mention here about the START treaty, the negotiations with Russia on nuclear disarmament, and obviously Obama is now trying to reset relations still with Russia. Would you foresee any Republican pressure from Congress in the future to kind of perhaps roll back on that?
Well, Russia is kind of one of a very tricky problem, because in '92, the U.S. had a great chance if Russia was collapsing. We kind of blew it, frankly. The IMF and the U.S. didn't give any money to Russia when it desperately needed it. And, I mean, although George Bush said, Putin, I've looked in his eyes, I see a good man, and so forth, and trust him, it's a tough situation where that's one country where I think everybody's kind of like, well, we know what we want. We want Russia to be democratic and be open and capitalist, but how to get it there is not easy. And also, you have the European allies who don't trust Russia as much as we do, which is, I think, kind of funny, because remember in the mid-'80s, Europe trusted Gorbachev much quicker before the U.S. did, and now we're still kind of friendly or trying to be friendly with Russia, while the Europeans are going, no, we don't trust them. In fact, we don't want to.
There's a history that you can't just erase, but don't mistake too the personal relationships that can happen between two people, George Bush and Vladimir Putin, and the policy that can evolve from the government and the stance that will be against or towards Russia. Russia is a mega energy source, also bringing 25% of Europe's energy in, and there are some countries that are 100% dependent on Russia. So you want to think twice about,
I was just going to bring up those pipelines, because they're trying to do pipelines outside of Russia.
Pipeline politics,
so the U.S. is actually saying we support these, going through Turkey, which is a NATO member. But it's not a simple situation.
There's also Iran. Don't forget.
Iran is the other problem. We don't want gas from Iran, but where do you get the gas for these pipelines? Russia's the only one with the gas. So it's a complicated situation.
But then countries like Georgia have turned to Iran when Russia has cut off their gas supply.
So I mean, I really don't think the Republican policy is going to be fundamentally different there, unless someone comes up with a brilliant idea. And if they come up with a brilliant idea, I think Obama will be like, let's try it. Let's work on it. Let's use it.
One key word is China, and you've both mentioned it. When you read reports about what Middle Americans are worried about, China also comes up quite a lot with jobs fleeing the US and so on. And obviously the Republicans historically have taken a much tougher stance on China than their opponents. But do you think that's just rhetoric, Ellen, and in fact you can't reverse the trend now, and China will continue to sap the economy to some extent?
Well, I think China is a formidable country, over a billion people, I think, with a growth rate of more than 10% that is supposed to keep going over the next couple of years. Can it continue? Will it continue? I think that we as Americans and as Republicans need to offer a more competitive advantage to people coming to our states if they want to come invest and make an economic environment environment more favorable to those who want to come invest. As you know, the states have that power to do that. And China shouldn't be a menace. China, I think we Americans have to adapt our economy and make our economy more productive, more competitive, and not invest in and prop up big unionized companies or companies that require such heavy heritage costs. You've noticed, I believe it's Honda that moved it south to Tennessee because the economic climate is much more favorable. Should we not then offer more comparative advantage for our states and economies that they can then move on? And China should be, but we just have to be better, don't we? We have to be better, and we have to incite growth inside the United States and move towards a transitional economy.
Well, I have to say, I think this is one issue where Obama's going to have the most problems with China. Because right now you have a senator in New York, Schumer, who's a Democrat, who keeps trying to pass a bill, I guess a law, to say that if you don't have a free-floating currency, we should put a tariff of it's whatever percent. I mean, I've seen a couple different numbers. I can't quite figure out what they make sense, but I think it's kind of a problem. Obama right now has been very good at stopping this, putting this out, getting rid of it. But with the Republicans in power, or at least split houses, I think he's going to have a tougher and tougher time dealing with that. And now China just had a little incident with Japan over a fishing boat. So, I mean, I think the Chinese policy is becoming a little problematic. But if you realize China does have issues, I mean, the growth is continuing like it is. 10% is phenomenal growth.
Sure it is.
But politically, they're not so stable. I mean, they have a transition in a couple of years to a new leader.
Sure.
Could this be another perfect transition? Maybe not, because now this is a whole new generation, never knew the old original guys. So China has a lot of problems. I think Obama realizes this, as we can't put too much pressure on them. Some of the Republicans and even some of the Democrats don't see that. So this could be a place where there could be a big spark. And as you said, China's a country with over 1 billion people. You just can't ignore it. I mean, it is a world player. Yeah.
We are going more towards a multilateral world and economy, and I think the openness and the more that we improve, as I say again, we improve our economy, we make ourselves better, much more competitive. We just have to be better than the others, don't we? And we have to be able to be able to face that sort of a challenge too. And then
we have to concentrate on what we're good at and what we're not good at.
And then there's the security issues. I mean, we can talk national security too, or we can talk, where the American forces are and what importance that has towards China. That's another issue.
Well, even then, like China, you think a country like North Korea, where China has probably doesn't want North Korea to fall immediately or fall rapidly. I mean, if it probably merged with South Korea, I think China may be happy, like, that's one less problem we have. So this should be some issue where we can work together. And unfortunately, North Korea is an enigma by itself, so you really can't help it. But the cooperation there hasn't been great, which is sad. But if our policy with China gets harsher, it's going to get far harder to cooperate with China on North Korea.
It sounds like the Republicans and Democrats are going to have actually quite a lot of areas of consensus, in spite of the rhetoric after the midterm elections, which we'll be covering, of course, in detail on France 24 tomorrow night on the 2nd of November. So I'd like to thank Ellen Wesselina from Republicans Abroad France and Brian Lang from Young Democrats Abroad France. That's all for this edition of Talking Points. Thanks for watching.